Hi everybody, welcome to another makeover. I found this dresser on Facebook Marketplace, and when I looked at the listing picture, the way it looked on it, I thought there could be a lot of potential in this dresser, like it could be a nice teak or walnut veneer. It was -30 when we picked it up, and I didn't have a chance to have a proper look at the dresser, but when I got it home and I looked at it, I knew that was not a high-end mid-century modern piece. It was one of those made out of chipboard with faux wood grain kind of dresser. Oh well, we work with what we've got. So let's see what I can find underneath this purple paint. I was trying to pull out the drawers and the first drawer got stuck. Actually, 3 of 6 drawers got stuck, but I didn't catch it on camera. Those plastic sliders, they were off the guys, so the only way I could pull the drawers out was to unscrew those plastic guys. The more I looked at the dresser, the more I suspected that she had been refinished more than once. And I found out that I was right when I took off this first pull. It had been painted red and yellow. I wanted to do a wooden paint combination. Yes, I wanted to add 1 or 2 more coats of paint to the dresser. And first I decided to strip just 2 drawers to see how would it go. And yes, I was using my Ica stripper again. I decided to give it one more chance because yeah, that's me. I don't make the same mistake twice. I make it 5 or 6 times to make sure. And while I'm stripping on this video, I want to say huge thank you to all of you guys who left some supportive and super nice comments about me being embarrassed. Not embarrassed, but maybe embarrassed in the way of my accent and me struggling with voicing over of my videos. Your comments mean a lot to me, honestly. It's like every comment is plus 20% to my confidence, so huge thank you for that. I let the stripper sit for half an hour and it actually wasn't bad. It worked okay. I found out that this dresser had been refinished 4 times before me. The latest version was purple, but before it had been blue, it had been golden, and it had been red and yellow. And gosh, some layers were so stubborn, so I used 3 coats of chemical stripper on top of my Ica stripper. And by the time I was done, I decided to paint the rest of the drawers because I didn't want to spend so much time on stripping. I scuff sanded the rest of the drawers and the body of the dresser with 120 grit sandpaper to give my paint some texture to grip onto. And while I was sanding, I noticed a lot of brush strokes because this dresser has been refinished so many times and it obviously was hand painted. So instead of having a lot of sanding and trying to get rid of those brush strokes, I decided to try something else on this dresser. But first, of course, I sanded my stripped wooden drawers with 120, 180, and 220 grit sandpaper. And I also sanded those wooden drawer spools. And here's a surprise, one of the drawers had stains. And I don't know where those stains came from. Maybe they were here all the time. Or maybe my Ica stripper left those stains because something like that happened before. I don't know. I used some oxalic acid trying to get rid of those stains. The oxalic acid works as a wood bleach. You just dissolve it in hot water in 1:10 ratio usually. Then apply to the wood and let it dry, or if your stain disappear, you just can dissolve it with baking soda solution. I ended up applying 2 coats of oxalic acid and it didn't work. Which is weird because usually in most cases it works. Almost forgot to say, if you let the oxalic acid dry on the surface, there will be some little crystals, so you need to rinse it with water. And then you gotta sand it because the water will raise the wood grain. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm sanding this drawer with 220 grit sandpaper. Because I'm going to be painting the rest of the dresser with dark color, I wanted the drawers to be kind of like rustic. To achieve that rustic look, I'm using the combination of 2 different wood stains. The first color is Early American, and for the second color, I used the leftovers of my ebony stain and I dissolved it with mineral spirit because I didn't want it to turn out black. It kind of filled up the wood grain, and on the top of it, I used Early American again because on this drawer, I could still see those yellow stains. With the other drawer and with the door pulls, I used just 2 layers, the first Early American and the second one my dissolved ebony stain. And I absolutely love how it turned out. For the paint, I used a Glidden 100% acrylic paint I had on hand in the color Tundra Pond, but I wanted it to be a bit darker, so I added some black fusion mineral paint to it and they mixed together very well. Once the first coat of the paint dried, I noticed some dents on the sides of the dresser. So I filled them up with the wood filler, let them dry, sanded them, and repaint these areas again. And remember I mentioned that I wanted to try something different on this dresser? So here's the fun part. I used my graining tools, that's what I call it on Amazon. I used that tool to create the fake wood grain out of paint. But I didn't want it to be like super visible. I just wanted to have like a little hint. That's why I put the thin layer of the paint and then I grained it. Grained it. I even don't know if it's real word or I just made it up. But anyways, I did it to the drawers and to the top of the dresser. I let my fake wood grain dry over the night and then I applied the second coat of the paint. And once that coat of paint dried, it was time to apply the top coat. For the top coat, I use a very thin soft touch poly and I mix it with a little bit of the paint to add this greenish shade to the polyurethane. I usually do that because sometimes with the dark paint, the top coat can turn out a little bit milky or yellowish. Not always, but there is a small chance. So to prevent this, I always mix my polyurethane with the paint I used. And I apply 2 coats to the drawers and 3 coats to the top of the dresser. For the wooden drawers, I decided to make the pulls painted at the same color as the rest of the dresser. I applied 2 coats of the paint and 2 coats of the top coat. To seal the wooden drawers and pulls, I used an Oddis oil. I know, I said that I was not going to use Oddis oil again, but it's a solid wood and it turned out great. If you're new here and you want to know what's wrong with Oddis oil, I will link in the description the videos where I explain what kind of troubles I had with Oddis oil. And here we're almost at the finish line, you guys. I just need to finish the legs. But I didn't like how the dresser looked from this side. So I decided to paint the parts, the visible parts. I decided to keep the legs wooden instead of painting, so I sanded them first using my drill and 100 grit, 120, 180 and 220 grit sandpaper. And then I stained them the same way I did the drawers. And once the stain dried, I sealed the legs with Oddis oil. I cleaned those caps off camera and they happened to be a solid brass, so I got lucky I didn't have to paint them. And if you're made so far and you were enjoying this video, it would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumb up. And we are almost ready. But first, let me remind you what I started with. And here's the final result. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next makeover. And please ignore those fingerprints on the right side of the dresser. I was helping with the dry walls and then I touched the dresser and I didn't notice that, but my camera caught it. Thank you and see you next week.